Koutou katoa. No mai haere mai. Ko Richard Jackson taku ingoa. No te ao o ronga maraeroa ahau. Please join me in a brief karakia. Whakataka te hao ki te uru. Whakataka te hao ki te tonga. Kia ma kinakina ki uta. Kia ma taratara ki tai. Ihai ake ane. Te atakura, he tio, he huka, he hauhu, ti he moriora. Nō reira. Rangi Māori e kia koutou. Shalom. Assalamu alaikum. Peace to you all, and welcome to this lecture. My name is Richard Jackson, and I'm the co-director of the National Centre for Peace and Conflict Studies. But I'm also the deputy chair of the Archibald Baxter Memorial Trust. And it's my great pleasure to welcome you to the Archibald Baxter Annual Peace Lecture that the Trust organises every year to commemorate peace and the role of conscientious objectors in looking for alternatives to war. Today I'm standing in for Professor Kevin Clements, who's the chair of our Trust, but unfortunately couldn't be with us in person. I know he's with us in spirit. The Trust was formed in late 2010 by a group of people including Kevin and Alan Jackson, David Grant, members of the Baxter family, and many others, some of whom are in this room with us today. The purpose of the Trust is to promote peace education and peace studies at all levels of the community, but more specifically, the Trust has three primary aims. To organise an annual peace lecture to be given in Baxter's name, to establish a physical memorial in Dunedin to remember those who stood for peaceful alternatives to conflict and war, where visitors can reflect on the experience of Archibald Baxter and his companions and their reasons for rejecting war, and lastly, to promote reflection on Archie's stand against war in Otago schools, through activities such as essay and speech competitions. After many years of toil and many twists and turns that I'm sure many of you are aware of, the official opening of the Archibald Baxter Peace Garden took place on 29 October 2021. And one of the main reasons we invited our esteemed speaker tonight was that as the Deputy Prime Minister, we were honoured enough that he came down and opened that memorial for us. And yeah, we're delighted that he is able to speak to us and maintains that relationship with us. So I probably don't need to spend a lot of time introducing our speaker tonight. I'm sure most of you have heard of him. The Hon Grant Robertson became the Vice-Chancellor on the 1st of July this year, so he's newly in the job. But he comes to us after 15 years as a Member of Parliament. He was New Zealand's Minister of Finance from 2017 until 2023, and Deputy Minister from 2020 to 2023. He's also an alumni of the university. He had a notorious period as a student politician before becoming a much more respectable real politician. I'm sure he's going to talk a little bit about his time in student politics. But anyway, we thought that as the Trust, we thought that he would be an ideal person to give this lecture tonight. And there are a number of reasons for that. I mean, he has lived here for some time and is familiar with the area that Archibald Baxter himself came from. But he's also a former diplomat, having represented New Zealand in places like Samoa and at the United Nations. As the Minister of Finance, he pioneered the well-being budget approach, a kind of new, more peaceful way of doing national finances. And as Minister of Sport and Recreation, he led New Zealand's first strategy for women and girls in sport and recreation. So we're really delighted to have him give his lecture tonight, and I would ask you to please give him a warm Dunedin welcome.
O tihe Māori ora, he mihi ana ngā mana whenua ki tēnei takiwā. Ka te māmoe, waitaha, kaitahu whānui katoa, a tēnā koutou katoa. E nā mana e nā reo, a rangatira mā nā hoai whā, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Kia tau te rangamari e, o te rangi i tu iho nei, o papatua nuku i ta koutou nei, o te taiao e awhi nei, kia runga i a tātou, tihe Māori ora. May the peace of the sky above, of the Mother Earth below, and of all the embracing universe rest upon us all. Behold, it is life. Thank you, Richard, very much for your introduction. I'm glad you didn't run through the whole CV, but actually I'm going to do a bit of that tonight as well, so that's one of the reasons I'm pleased that you didn't. It is a tremendous honour for me to have been asked by the Archibald Baxter Trust to deliver this lecture tonight. As Richard's indicated to you, I spoke at the opening of the Peace Garden in October 2021, and my name appears on the plaque. On that day, I brought both my support for the Trust and the memorial, but also an apology to conscientious objectors and their whānau for the appalling treatment they received at the hands of the military and in turn the government. I reiterate that today, no longer as a representative of the government, but as a person who believes that the story of our conscientious objectors is as much a part of our history as those who served in our military. I'm humbled to be here too, because I do not think that I have the courage of Archibald Baxter. I know that were Archie here today, he would not agree about every matter that I'm going to speak about tonight, as you might expect. But I have fundamental respect for him and for the work of the Trust. And I want to acknowledge the Trust members who are here today and those who cannot be with us. The world we live in today makes it more important than ever that we strive for peace and that we work to be peacemakers and peace builders. The work of the Trust and of Te Ao Rongamarairua, the National Centre for Peace and Conflict Studies, is important. To be able to make a contribution to support both entities is something that I am very pleased to do. I've chosen to play with words a bit in the title of tonight's lecture, and a bit later on I will put up some definitions to help frame our topic a bit more clearly. But the word play is intentional. The main point that I want to make tonight, this is what they call a spoiler alert, is that I believe there is an important role for Aotearoa New Zealand to play in making and building peace in the world. But in order to be able to play that role, we have to make peace with our past as a country, with the ongoing impact of colonisation and with the racism that still exists in Aotearoa today. I say this not to diminish what has been achieved in our country. We have to build on what has been achieved, but we have to acknowledge and address what has been ignored and passed over. Without this reconciliation and redress about our past, we cannot be the authentic voice we need to be to genuinely make and promote peace in the world. Now, it is important at the outset tonight to be clear that I am delivering this lecture in my personal capacity rather than speaking as Vice-Chancellor. That's not to say that the university doesn't have a role in the issues that I'm going to be discussing tonight. In fact, one of the reasons I'm here is because I was attracted to the vision of the University of Otago, Otago Whakaihu Waka, to be a Te Tiriti-led university. That is a brave step on a long journey, but I firmly believe it is one that will give this institution an essential role in helping shape the future of our nation, just as it has done for 155 years before. Equally, through the work of the Centre for Peace and Conflict Studies, we can take that foundation of a Te Tiriti focus into the world of peacemaking and peace building. And on that note, I want to acknowledge the recent appointment of Dr. Liana MacDonald, the first person to step into the recently created role of Chair in Māori, Moriori and Indigenous Peace Studies. In this role, Liana will lead the Centre's engagement with Indigenous, Māori and Moriori peace practices, bolster bicultural principles and processes in Aotearoa, New Zealand. Liana will be the co-director of the centre along with Richard, and in both substance and structure, this is a significant appointment in the context of the university's Te Tiriti journey. As an aside, I would note that much of what I'm going to talk about tonight is well and truly in Liana's wheelhouse, and I want to acknowledge that she and others have a much greater level of knowledge of the issues that I am about to speak about, but hopefully I can make a contribution and start to simulate some thinking. I am going to take a little bit of time tonight to describe where I'm coming from and my background that has led me to take the views that I'm going to express today. It's fair to say that recently I've had a few moments of wondering quite how I came to be here. Now, I don't mean to alarm the members of the University Council who are here when I say that, but as a boy from South Dunedin who was a student activist and became the president of OUSA, the idea of being VC of this university is almost more unbelievable to me than being Deputy Prime Minister or Minister of Finance. It's true to say that as the president of OUSA some 31 years ago, I did spend a lot of time telling the then Vice-Chancellor how to do his job. And I guess now this is what they call karma. But I think of it this way. In the end, I'm a boy who tried to follow his mother's instructions to treat others as he wished to be treated, to believe that we are our brother and sister's keepers, and who, in true Presbyterian style, was told to work hard and not show off too much. My South Dunedin upbringing included my time at King's High School, or as we called it euphemistically in the 1980s, the Bayview Road Academy for Young Gentlemen. I suspect nowadays it actually owns that title. It certainly didn't then, and it didn't either when Archie's son James attended that school. James famously had a fairly miserable time at King's, mostly because he refused to do cadet training and was bullied for that. He did, however, spend time in the library particularly well, the same library where I first learned about his father and his extraordinary story of courage and determination. It was also in that library that as a seventh former, I took myself away from history class. That history class was studying World War II, and instead I chose to study on my own New Zealand history as a topic for bursary. 35 years ago, it was Tudor and Stuart England and World War II if you wanted to do history in seventh form. I took myself off to look at New Zealand history for two reasons. One, because I was no fan of war and war stories, but also because I hungered to know my own country. I wrote essays on things like the Red Feds and women's suffrage, and on that note, happy Suffrage Day to you all. He mihi ana ngā wahine toa. But alas, even then, our curriculum was at best sparse on the treaty, let alone Te Tiriti, or indeed colonisation. I learned a bit more about that when I enrolled here at the University of Otago, and I want to particularly acknowledge Michael Riley and Tom Brooking in the history department for awakening in me an interest in our colonial past. As a student politician, I was taking some tentative steps towards working out what our colonial past meant for tertiary education. At that point in time, fewer than 5% of our student population was Māori. Incidentally, it's now 14% of domestic students. As student politicians, we began some painful conversations about why that percentage was so low and what we could and should be doing about it. We didn't get far. I went to Wellington to become the New Zealand University Students Association Vice and Co-President and achieved my KPI when the then Prime Minister Jim Bolger called me a full-time paid troublemaker. It's also where I first met Kate Jews, Nikki Hager and others who talked about peace. And as Richard's indicated, after I finished my spell as a student politician, I worked for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Trade, firstly in Samoa and then at the United Nations in New York. My work in those roles has shaped many of the things I'm going to talk about tonight. So perhaps more importantly, my personal journey took a significant turn in this regard 26 years ago, where I grudgingly agreed to come out of my early retirement from rugby to play for New Zealand's first ever gay rugby team, the Crazy Knights. I had decided that rugby was not for me after playing most of my life in the game into my early 20s. But the team's organiser pushed me as they needed people who had played before. I agreed so long as I could pick my position. That position was number 8. Now, for those of you not familiar with rugby, that's the person at the back of the scrum of people. The person who stands immediately behind the scrum is the halfback. In the crazy nights, the halfback was a Ngāti Porou whānau Apanui man named Alf, who I'd never met before. 26 years later, he's my husband, and I'm a proud granddad to our beautiful young wahine. You can try and pick which we are from the photo. Through him, I've been exposed to his whānau, hapu and iwi, and to a whakapapa and worldview that was unimaginable from the library at King's High School. I have learned about the depth and breadth of that whakapapa, the intrinsic connections to land, to air, and to water. To wake up and gaze at Hikurangi as it rises to the heavens, to wade into the Waiapu to cleanse, to head to the Moana Whakai, especially to head to the Moana Whakai. I've experienced the generosity of spirit, the manaakitanga to embrace and understand all those who come onto the whenua, the laughter and the tears, the challenge and the welcome. And then I became a politician. Now, in all seriousness, apart from a greater interest in sharing with me some ideas, none of the manaakitanga that I have experienced has changed. What did change for me as a politician was a greater awareness of the impact of colonisation on Māori. As a politician, one of the great pleasures in our parliament is to help shepherd through the treaty settlement processes, to listen to the kōrero and to the waiata, to hear the stories of triumph and tragedy, of hurt and of loss. And at the end of it all, a lasting settlement and redress to help support a people to build and rebuild, to give hope and aspiration to the mokopuna to come. And yet, each and every one of those settlements represents a tiny fraction of what has been lost, of the value of the land, the lost opportunity, the loss of tohunga, the hurt internalised, and the hope gone for generations. When I hear that small vocal group of New Zealanders say that Māori are getting special treatment or privilege, I ask that we all respond by noting the exceptional generosity from iwi that sits within our Te Tiriti framework, to agree to settle a claim for a fraction of the value so that they and their people can move forward, but also that we as a nation can move forward. It is a gift to us all that we should not squander. The other thing as a politician that I was exposed to was the disparities that have arisen from colonisation. Now, I'm not going to spend my time tonight listing every statistic because I do want to turn our sights to the future. But that very redress that we are trying to find through the Te Tiriti processes is playing catch-up in health, in education, in employment, in prison statistics, in home ownership and more. And when I hear that we need to focus our social supports on need, not race, I find it hard to understand how some people can be so unaware of the history and the causes of that need, of the way in which colonisation creates intergenerational hardship and hurt and intergenerational need. It is owning up to this part of our past that I believe is essential to stand confidently in the world. Taking the steps to right the wrongs that is making peace with our past. It is including recognising that rangatiratanga was not ceded. If we can do that, then it is my view that we will as a nation be able to stand on the world stage as a country with something to say to the rest of the world about how we make progress together. As I said earlier, I don't want to diminish what we have achieved as a nation. Te Tiriti o Waitangi has been dishonoured and diminished, but it's also been remarkable. It has given us a framework for reconciliation and redress that is the envy of many countries around the world. Through the extraordinary mahi of Māori, we have also seen the revitalisation of te reo, the development of kohanga reo, kura kaupapa, wānanga. We've seen Māori health organisations deliver to their communities. We've seen houses built, lakes and rivers restored. As a nation, we are so much further forward than we were when I sat in that library 35 years ago. At schools around New Zealand today, Te Ao Māori is in full sight for all students. Through kapahaka, through the New Zealand Histories curriculum, through Matariki, the world's first Indigenous public holiday. We are all learning and understanding. I remember several years ago as a minister attending an Australia-New Zealand forum in Sydney. We were in a cavernous hall where our Prime Ministers were addressing close to 1,000 people. The Australian Prime Minister spoke and welcomed us all, and he did a good job. Our Prime Minister stood up to respond and spoke warmly and well. When she finished, a waiata began. It was tūtera mai. As one, the New Zealanders dotted around the room stood and sang. As we sat down, an Aboriginal elder sitting at my table reached across and held my hand. She didn't let it go for some time, and she simply said, "Thank you. We've got a long way to go, but we're doing some things right." All of this leads me to an unshakable view that if Māori are doing well, if Māori are given their rangatiratanga, if we are all comfortable in our place in Aotearoa, then we all do better. We are a richer country in every respect. I think a lot about the messages that my mokopuna hear about being Māori, about their language and their culture, the negativity and the sneering accusations of privilege, the diminishing of value that makes my heart hurt. But then my stepdaughter sends me a video of my eldest mokopuna in Kapahaka at Polyfest, and she's proud and she's happy and she knows her place in the world. And in her Kapahaka group are young people from every conceivable background, comfortable in their place in Aotearoa too. So whatever the trends of politics at any given moment, I feel we are making progress. We've got more work to do, of course, but if we stay the course, we will make peace with our past. We will also then be in a place to weave together the elements of who we are into the cloak we wear in the world outside these beautiful islands. We can weave together the messages of Te Whiti, of Hohu Turongo, the set of tikanga-based approaches to dispute and conflict resolution that have been developed over centuries. We can weave that with a steadfastly independent worldview that is the legacy of our nuclear-free stance. We can bring to the world an understanding that the peaceful future of our planet relies on action to look after our climate and our environment. We can take a Pacific perspective to support the small island states around the world. We can be the peacemakers and peace builders of the 21st century. Now, this is the point of the lecture. If you are watching at home, you might want to get up and make a cup of tea, because in order to explain what I mean by making peace with our future, I do need to do some political science nerdery and explain some definitions. Many New Zealanders will be familiar with the concept of peacekeeping. We have prided ourselves in previous decades on our role in leading and being part of peacekeeping efforts around the globe. Peacekeeping can be defined, as it is on the screen, as security control measures, such as monitoring, regulating and separating parties. It's an effort to stop or limit the harmful symptoms of escalated conflict, direct violence, such as abuse or attack, or potential violence, and to establish sufficient safety to enable efforts towards preventing further violence. As noted by the Canadian authors of this definition, peacekeeping is important, but it does not right wrongs or address the conflicts that are causing violence. The other two elements in a peace-building system are peace-building and peacemaking. And again, our Canadian friends define those, as you can see on the screen. Peacemaking involves dialogue, deliberation, and dispute resolution. It's an effort for each party to understand and address the perceptions and interests of the other party with whom they're in conflict, and to engage those parties in jointly co-creating a decision about how to repair the presenting situation. Peace building goes further. It involves using diplomatic and political means to create the conditions for sustainable peace, such as by building democratic institutions and monitoring elections. Peace building is a long-term process that aims to address the underlying causes of violence and transform social systems. From the same Canadian organisation, you can see this diagram. In it, the peacekeeping circle is the smallest in the diagram. In a peace-building system, less peacekeeping is needed, and peacemaking and building would transform the roots of violence into the roots of a durable peace. The peace-building circle is the largest in the diagram because it is the most comprehensive system for preparing for and handling conflicts. It is the construction of this system that I believe is the opportunity that exists for Aotearoa New Zealand. It represents a significant shift in the way we think about our relationships with the world. But in my opinion, it actually builds on our past actions, on how we are perceived in the world, and as I've said, on how we can be a Te Tiriti-led nation. Now you might ask why I didn't do more in this space as a politician. And somewhere buried in Labour Party conference resolutions, you will find that this idea has been promoted before. And I also want to acknowledge my former colleague, the Honourable Nanaia Mahuta, who began work on how to truly reflect Te Ao Māori in our foreign policy. After the 2023 election, when we were in caretaker mode for the coalition to form, I was actually the foreign minister for 2 weeks. That'll help you win a pub quiz one day. However, it was not quite long enough to get the job done. But I truly believe that this approach is in our DNA. Former Foreign Minister Phil Goff likes to tell the story of New Zealand's peacekeepers in Timor-Leste, who were able to find connections with local communities in ways that troops from other countries could not. He recalls going into communities to find the mostly Māori peacekeepers interacting with locals in a deep and caring way. As he said, the New Zealand peacekeepers arrived armed with guitars, not guns. And as a country, we have made peace before. The work done to help resolve the conflict in Bougainville in the late 1990s has many of the elements of what I am envisaging. The future that I envisage for New Zealand is the spirit of this approach. With a strong Te Ao Māori lens, this should be integral to an approach that underpins a philosophical and systemic change to how we approach our foreign policy. The future I envisage for New Zealand is the spirit of this approach, with a strong Te Ao Māori lens. It should be integral to an approach that understands a philosophical and systemic change to how we approach our foreign policy. The path forward from here will be challenging, but I believe that we can do it based on the following steps. Firstly, as I've indicated throughout the speech, a strong path to reconciliation and recognising rangatiratanga at home. It is essential that any Te Ao Māori approaches are not only supported by addressing our own past, but also by making sure that they are driven by tikanga and taken on board in their own right, not as some tokenistic add-on to more traditional Western concepts. Secondly, if we are to take this approach as a country, we must make sure it is a genuine partnership between Māori and Pākehā from the beginning. What I'm envisaging here is the development of an institution that can go out into the world and make and develop peace-building initiatives. Such an institution would itself need to be Te Tiriti based. It would draw on the best people we have across our nation. An independent foreign policy is essential to being able to continue an approach like this. We do need to take into account the existing relationships that we have in the world. In order to succeed as a peacemaker and peace builder, we need to have the foundation of that genuinely independent foreign policy. An independent foreign policy does not mean never taking a stance on a conflict or an issue, but it does mean taking our own position based on what is best for our people, our region, and the world as a whole. A commitment to our region first and foremost, an enabling and not patronising approach in that region. In rethinking our role, we will need to assess our place in these networks and arrangements to support our role. In the Pacific in particular, our independent foreign policy is an essential foundation to playing a peacemaking and peace-building role. The Pacific is an ever-increasing theatre where geopolitical drama is played out. It's likely to become even more so in the coming decades. The stability and security of our region needs resources and those with influence to step up alongside small island nations and support them in their journey. Alongside the geopolitics are the emerging threats to peace and security. The most obvious of those is climate change. In my view, any serious approach to peace building and peacemaking must include taking on the issue of climate change. In our Pacific region, this is a literal matter of life and death on a daily basis. We need to make sure that peacemaking and peace building takes this issue forward. We need resources. The approach will not work without resources being allocated both from central government and other interested institutions. There are also many opportunities for us to tap into international philanthropic organisations and work with multilateral organisations. I believe that any successful approach to peacemaking or peace building has to include a place for citizen peacemaking. I'm a firm believer that approaches such as this are best driven from the ground up. We need to offer opportunities for involvement at a local level in making sure we build partnerships with communities across the globe. And finally, a true commitment to multilateralism. However flawed that the United Nations is, I still believe it and other multilateral institutions are essential to providing the fora for the kind of peacemaking and peace-building work that is needed. If the United Nations didn't exist, someone would invent it. My own experience there is some 2 decades old. The UN desperately needs reform, and we need to play a major part in that. The Security Council is not doing the job that we want it to do in many conflicts around the world. I used to say when I was at the UN that in order to succeed there, you needed to be a fan of Test cricket. It takes a long time to get things done, and things tend to end up in a draw from time to time. But it's still the best we've got for bringing our world together. I genuinely think that this role of peacemaking and peace building for New Zealand is possible, and that Aotearoa is uniquely placed to lead it. We have always been a place where Māori have stood as their tūranga waiwai, but for too long we have made it hard to stand proud, to stand together, to be the promise that Aotearoa could be. But I see hope despite the political blip that is happening now. I think the child in Alan Kernow's poem has been born. We now need to nurture them, take them into the world. This is not some starry-eyed neo-colonialism that says we've got all the answers. In fact, it's quite the opposite. It's the idea that from the ashes of colonialism, we are reimagining ourselves as a country, that we can help resolve conflict by actually listening and hearing those who are involved. I do not presuppose that we have all the answers, but with the will, we have the way to help people. And then Aotearoa will have the most solid of foundations to stand in the world. We will be continuing to make peace with our past and to venture into the world to make peace confident in who we are. Kia kaha, kia maya, kia manawa nui, tēnā koutou katoa.